Thanks to our title sponsor, Juniper Networks, for helping make Research Saturday possible. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
So as part of our proactive hunting processes, we usually keep tabs on the different types of malicious files that we see out in the field, in our telemetry, out on public repositories. And that's how we got the initial lead for this specific APT and the specific infection chains and the related malware.
That's Asheer Malhotra from Cisco Talos. The research we're discussing today is titled InSideCopy: How This APT Continues to Evolve Its Arsenal. Juniper Connected Security helps organizations build threat-aware networks that extend security to every point of connection across the network. To learn more, visit juniper.net/security or connect with Juniper on Twitter or Facebook. That's juniper.net/security. And now, a message from our sponsor, Tanium. In a distributed cloud-based world, managing and protecting endpoints has never been more important. The Tanium Endpoint platform provides real-time visibility, comprehensive control, and rapid response for endpoints across distributed operations. That's why the Department of Defense and half of the Fortune 100 trust Tanium to secure and manage their IT operations. Want to try for yourself? Visit tanium.com/cyberwire to get a 14-day free trial of Tanium as a service. That's tanium.com/cyberwire. And we thank Tanium for sponsoring our show. Well, let's dig into some of the details here. Can we start off with just an overview of exactly what it is we're talking about here and the types of things that they do?
Sure. So our research focuses on a group called SideCopy. This is a group that focuses primarily on the Indian subcontinent with a very heavy focus on India and Afghanistan and a little bit of focus on Pakistan as well. This is a group that primarily targets government entities, specifically military personnel and diplomatic personnel. And then we've seen a few civil servants, traditional government employees being targeted as well. This group tries to carry out espionage using a variety of different malware and accompanying plugins as well. And that's what this whole white paper is all about. That's what our whole research is all about. We basically tear apart the entire arsenal of this APT group and, we talk about it and we present it.
Well, let's walk through it together. Maybe let's go through from start to finish here. I mean, let's say I'm one of those folks that they're trying to target. How would I find myself initially compromised?
So usually you'll get an email in your inbox which contains a malicious Windows link, a malicious link file or a malicious shortcut. Or you'll get a link to the actual malicious shortcut file. And they're basically trying to social engineer you into opening that specific file. Once you open up that file, what follows is a very convoluted chain of infection consisting of different types of HTA files, different types of loader DLLs, ultimately resulting in a remote access Trojan, which is a RAT being deployed on your computer or on your system or your endpoint. And that's the whole infection process as a whole. They put a lot of effort into social engineering because, they have to entice users into opening up their malicious files, which is why we see different types of themes that are related to military and diplomatic and, something that piques your interest and tricks you into, infecting yourself.
So we feel as though they're being fairly successful on the social engineering end of things.
Yeah, they use a variety of themes. So basically the way this infection works is that when you open up a malicious shortcut file during the infection process, they display a decoy document to you or a decoy picture to you, and that document usually pertains to a military topic or a diplomatic topic, and that's how we feel that they're targeting specific personnel in the military and the diplomatic community as well in certain geographies.
So, meanwhile, behind the scenes, while this rat is being deployed, what's going on there? How are they able to allow that to get its purchase on your system?
So it starts with the malicious shortcut file, right? And the malicious shortcut file basically goes out and downloads something called an HTA file. It's an HTML application. This is kind of like an HTML file, but it can be opened using a native Windows application that is not a web browser. And they can use that malicious HTA file, which can contain different types of scripts, subscripts in them like JavaScript or VB script. And these files are hosted on an attacker-controlled website or an attacker-controlled IP address. And that HTA file is what contains the actual RAT payload, which is in turn, deobfuscated and then deployed onto the victim's endpoint.
So, can you take us through the spectrum of different RATs that they have available to them, the various things they're looking to install and the capabilities there?
Right. Primarily, they rely on two types of RAT families, which are their go-to RAT families. The first one is CetaRAT, and the second one is Allakore RAT. CetaRAT is a custom RAT that they built in-house. They use the C# programming language, and it's basically a .NET-based RAT family. The second RAT that they use is called Allakore. It's a commodity RAT. It's been available out in the wild. The source code for it has been available out in the wild for quite some time now. This is a Delphi-based RAT family, and we've seen that CetaRAT and Allakore RAT have increasingly been deployed by these threat actors since their discovery in 2019. Other than these two primary RAT families, we've also found 4 new custom RAT families. We found DataRAT, which is another C#-based custom RAT family. We named it DataRAT because I'm very bad at naming rats. And then we found reverse rat, we found margulis rat, and then we found another one that's called action rat. So action rat is a rat family that is also Delphi based, and it's also C# based. There's 2 versions that they maintain. If you just take a preliminary glance at it, it looks like Allakore RAT, but it's really not Allakore RAT. It's completely different. And this is a new rat family that we found, being used by the attackers. Other than the 4 custom RAT families, we also found 3 new commodity RATs being used by the attackers. One is called Lilith. One is called Epicenter RAT. Both of these RAT families are not very popular, but they've been available out in the wild for a long time. These are commodity RATs. The source code is available online, and attackers usually use commodity RATs to throw off attribution, so that they don't have to develop stuff in-house. That's one. The other is that attribution becomes difficult because these RAT families, commodity RAT families, are used by crimeware syndicates and also by APT groups. The third commodity RAT family that we discovered was NJRAT, and they've heavily started using this since the beginning of this year, since January 2021. NJRAT family it's a very popular RAT family. There's a number of APT groups, there's a number of crimeware groups that have used NJRAT over the years since it became available out in the wild. So yeah, it's basically 2 primary RAT families followed by 4 custom RAT families and 3 commodity RAT families. Other than that, we also know that during their post-infection phase, once they've deployed these RATs and they've established a foothold on the system, they will then start deploying plugins, which are independent, dedicated malware components that run mutually exclusive of each other on the system to serve specific purposes. For example, we found different types of file managers and file utilities that can be used to enumerate files and download files and exfiltrate files. We found different types of credential stealers that steal credentials from different kinds of web browsers, Firefox, Chromium-based web browsers, Internet Explorer, etc. We also found a peculiar plugin which is Golang based. It's basically used for file enumeration, but it's also used to steal specific types of database files that belong to a multi-factor authentication application that is developed and operated by the government of India. And this is interesting because they have a very heavy focus on stealing credentials. So these attackers basically try to, get database files that lets them access restricted networks, or lets them access restricted email boxes, or lets them get into VPNs, right? By using authentication. That's one side of the coin here. On the other hand, we've also seen the attackers set up fake login pages for the government of India's webmail. Basically, this is a page that masquerades as a legitimate login portal for your email via the web browser. And you enter your user ID and your password, and you basically end up divulging these credentials to the attackers. Based on their heavy focus on the credential stealing and the heavy focus on the RATs, they want to access restricted networks and restricted resources, and they want to establish that foothold. They want to maintain persistent access into these networks and into these resources, which is basically, your typical espionage, over the wire.
Do you have any sense for how precise they're being? In other words, are they targeting a specific RAT and a specific set of plugins to specific people in specific positions?
So primarily they target military personnel and diplomatic entities. There are a few RATs that we haven't seen being deployed yet, but we've discovered that there is a definitive link between SideCopy and the RATs that we've disclosed in our research. Other than that, it depends on the situation. Like the RATs are used to do preliminary reconnaissance, figure out whether the target is of value to them, so that they can, in turn deploy more RATs and more plugins onto their endpoint and establish, a more permanent foothold on the victim's computer, and in turn their restricted networks.
How noisy is this? If someone, for example, has endpoint protection running on their system, is it likely that it's going to be flagged here?
Yes. So this will be flagged and detected, provided that you have you have proper cyber hygiene. You restrict different types of file paths, and you restrict different types of file behaviors, and you detect different types of file behaviors. Don't click or don't open files that you're not sure about, which is like security 101. If you're suspicious of something, don't open that. But then yet again, people do open stuff. People, we are all curious animals. So people do end up getting infected. So coupled with the right threat intelligence, however, like the one we provide, you can easily block this RAT if you follow proper guidelines of security.
And suppose someone has been infected with it. Are there methods by which they try to maintain persistence?
It's primarily the RATs. The reason why they use a variety of RATs is probably because they want to go undetected, and even if one of their RAT families is detected and disclosed, they can still rely on the other ones, which is why they have this huge set of arsenal that they can deploy as and when they need.
And do we have any notion who's behind this?
We know that these guys are, they primarily focus on the Indian subcontinent. In terms of tactics, there is a very close resemblance to another APT group that's called Transparent Tribe. The code name is also APT 36 or Mythic Leopard. This is another APT group that doesn't use the same infection chain. They have their own set of malware, completely different set of malware. But the tactics that they use, both of these groups are very similar. They target the same geographies. They use the same kind of layers. They use the same kind of malicious documents and the same kind of themes that both of these groups use. All we can say right now is that they have a very heavy focus on the Indian subcontinent.
Now, in terms of the various RATs that they're deploying here, would a victim find themselves typically infected with a single RAT, or would they throw more than one at someone?
Yes. So when they started out their infection chains, they would primarily use CetaRAT, just one RAT family. And this was back in 2019. Since 2019, into 2020 and 2021, they have increasingly started deploying a combination of RATs. In one instance, in more than one instances, we found the attackers deploy CetaRAT and Allakore RAT on the same endpoint. Then in another instance, we saw them deploy CetaRAT and ActionRAT in one instance. There were certain infection chains which were where the attackers would deploy multiple copies of CetaRAT along with Allakore RAT on the same endpoint. It's a bit of an overkill, but it shows their commitment towards infecting their victims, right? And it kind of shows over-engineering as well, because their infection chains are highly modularized. They're all over the place. They don't need to be so modularized, and they don't need to deploy so many RATs on the endpoint at the same time. But it also shows their commitment, as I said, to infect their victims.
Yeah, that's interesting. So to wrap up here, what are your recommendations then? What are the best ways for folks to protect themselves against this sort of thing?
Right. So I always say this with multiple infection chains and multiple RAT families. It's very important to have a layered defense model. You should have protection over email. You should have protection over network. You should have protection over the endpoint as well, et cetera, so that, you can catch and block these attacks at different stages of the infection chain, so that if you miss one, you can catch them during the other. And that's what's really important. You have to block these attacks because these are essentially, government sponsored, or they're motivated by national interests. So they're highly dangerous groups that are operating very dangerous malware, right? They're not driven by profit, they're driven by espionage. So it's very important to have a very layered defense model so that you can protect yourself across different attack surfaces, if I may say.
Our thanks to Asheer Malhotra for joining us. The research is titled InSideCopy: How This APT Continues to Evolve Its Arsenal. We'll have a link in the show notes. Thanks to Juniper Networks for sponsoring our show. You can learn more at juniper.net/security or connect with them on Twitter or Facebook. Thanks to Tanium for their sponsorship. Learn more about Tanium as a service and sign up for a 14-day free trial at tanium.com/cyberwire. The CyberWire Research Saturday is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Puru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.